everybody. Well, yesterday was quite a session, really. Not a good session in many ways, but a session. And what I did do yesterday was point out to everybody that Jim Dale's not a qualified meteorologist. He's a self-appointed meteorologist. But we'll go through a few points that I raised yesterday about the issue we were talking about, and I will give you the fuller story behind the scenes. But I can say from the very start this, in the green room, Jim arrived. I always get an hour and a half or so early because of the train times. But Jim arrived normally 5-10 minutes early, and this time over an hour early. So I had to sit with him for an hour. And I won't mention the names, but let's say two fairly leading socialists, one who used to be a minister in the government, in a coalition government, were there. So they're very wedded to the green issue and very wedded to the mindset of Jim. And but Jim kept prodding, and I kept asking him. I didn't want to discuss it because he came up with such silly subjects. So it was like trying to deal with a child. I really mean this. I was having to explain things like, because the Earth curves away, when the radiation comes in from the sun, you get less per square meter the further north you go, etc. So I was trying to explain things like this to him, which he was totally misunderstanding. His level of knowledge is so low, it's beyond belief. And this is what causes me the problem. I never wanted to expose Jim. I really didn't. I'd always rather, and I do it with anyone, debate them regardless. You debate the evidence, not the person. But we've reached a stage where it's difficult because I mentioned something that any meteorologist would know about, and Jim doesn't. And so, anyway, we'll get on with yesterday. I didn't get really a pleasant reception, in my view, when I came out of the room. But before we entered that television, the studio part from the green room, it was, just I'd already told him that he's not a meteorologist in that session, face to face, so he knew what I was saying. He claimed that anyone could get a CMET, it's just a piece of paper, you just apply for it. No, that is not the case, Jim. And in the UK and in many countries, you'll have professional associations. And what Jim is he did get a certificate. He got one for an observer, so he can read temperatures and the different instruments, etc., in the Royal Navy. And that's all he's got. And he's claiming experience since. Well, let me put it to you this way. If someone 40 years ago was taught to put bandages on properly, and to take the temperature of a patient, does that qualify them to be a doctor? And not only that, a leading doctor to appear as an expert witness. The part that gets me about the expert witness bit is you have to be an expert, you have to be qualified. So I don't understand. I'm simply aghast at how he could appear in murder trials as he claims to have done. Not disputing that he did, he claims it fine. Because if the other side could easily say, hold on here, you're not qualified. And I think it's more a case of the lawyers haven't realised that he has no qualifications. Certainly I wouldn't allow anyone to operate on me or my kin, if you like, without being a doctor. And the other point is this. How can I put it? In climate science, I don't like the term climate scientist, to be honest, but it's the easiest one. If anything, and even the term, which I am, a hydroclimatologist, that's the work I've done. I wasn't just that. That was just part of my work. What I was not was a manager of water. I didn't do that. That was the operations department. My department always that I worked on was to do with the environment, the hydrology, the climate, etc., the monitoring, the data collection, all of that. And so just like in being a doctor, you could say a heart surgeon is a doctor, but your GP is also a doctor, and your brain surgeon is a doctor, and all these people are doctors. There's many different disciplines, but they're all doctors. And in the same way, you could say with climate scientists. And so my experiences comes from one end. And I'm not an academic. I could have become an academic easily, but for me to carry on for one more year when I'd done the thesis, I deserved it anyway. Actually, to carry on one more year to get the stamp and have a PhD, which you would do in academia. You do that in academia. So I'd study one little aspect of one little thing, and put a thesis in. That doesn't actually advance my knowledge. I chose to go into the world and actually use the systems, actually develop the systems on real data, and then use them to plan and so on. So it's a bit like an engineer when he builds a bridge. It can't be debatable whether it falls down or not. And just think about this. Here's a graph. This graph you've seen all before. This is a graph of all the different models, the 100 and odd models, putting aside the Russian model, which is reasonable. Putting aside that, you've got all these different models, and they can't. I mean, what you do know is there's a huge variation in them. It's not settled, is it, in any way, shape, or form in that? And you wouldn't trust any one of those, given that everyone else disagrees. Look at the difference in this one and this one. It really is potluck. And what they do is they try to fit them to the past, which you can do with the control knobs, as it were. But as soon as you let them free into the future, they're away. This is the silly nature of all this. Anyway, let's get on with the show. And so I'm going to play the show and I'm going to dissect it as we go. This is coming in from the green room, where I've had an hour with begging him to just shut up, actually, and not debate, because it is like just a child, I promise you. Anyway, here we go.
It's now time, though, for Climate Control, where we unpick the debate around the climate. And on the agenda, MPs have warned that up to 10,000 people a year in the UK could die as a result of heatwaves if nothing is done. That's to avert this crisis, according to the report from the Environmental Audit Committee. The increased frequency of extreme heat events could also cost the economy £60 billion a year as MPs push for an emergency plan to deal with the looming crisis. So I'm joined now by meteorologist Jim Dale and also social commentator Paul Burgess. All right, well,
there we are. I've been introduced again wrongly as a social commentator. What they should be saying is Jim Dale, meteorologist and social commentator, and Paul Burgess, climate scientist. But they've been copy and pasting this for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And after the show, I did mention it to Nana. She didn't understand, actually, because she didn't realise what she'd said, because she was reading from an auto cue. And I think somebody had copy and pasted each week after the first mistake. But they won't be doing it again, I'm assured. So it is nothing intentional, nothing, in any way wrong. It's just a mistake. So I just thought I'd mention that because a few people have commented already on the previous weeks.
I'm going to start with you because, Jim, it is really you who talks climate. So talk to me about weather, sorry. So talk to me about the weather. Why are we going to have these heat waves? And is it even true?
Yeah, it's true. I don't think the magic, is that the right word? Yes. I don't think they sort of brought the rabbit out the hat on this one. This is produced by scientists who are advising this particular committee of what will happen when temperatures move. Now, 1.5 degrees doesn't...
In fairness to Jim here, generally the alarmist scientists are always forecasting more heat. They're always forecasting that. So I don't think they're particular scientists here, but in fairness to him, yep, I accept that the climate alarmists are, for an ever-warming planet. Totally accepted.
Seem a lot, 2 degrees doesn't seem a lot, but as I've said before, if you put that into your human body, then it does make a big difference. And those that they're talking about are essentially the elderly and the infirm. That's where this is directed at. And those temperatures do make a difference when you get into the high 30s, low 40s. That does have an effect. Ask any doctor, ask any nurse. You will see an increase in people going into the NHS at that time, and that is what they're aiming at.
But you'd have that with cold, wouldn't you? So and more people probably die of cold, don't they?
Yeah, but I'm not in favour of anybody dying of cold or warm. So it's not a battle, a race to the bottom. It's a case of looking after at one side when it does go cold, which will happen later this week for your information, and when it goes too hot in the same way. So I don't think anybody should be arguing that we shouldn't be looking after those that are going to suffer when...
Is this global warming, the heat waves and things? Are they an example of it?
Well, without a shadow of a doubt, the graph is in one direction only, and it does mean not every single day, not during the middle of winter, although as you saw last week, as you may have seen last week, we saw the 20 degrees C in Northwest Islands, which is ridiculous for the time of year and a record. So it's going in that direction. I just think this is a case of looking at, and it isn't just about health, by the way. You saw the 60 billion. 60 billion is a lot of money.
The 60 billion is just, of course, a way of justifying, spending tens and tens of billions to mitigate against this excess heat in the UK. There's always used by governments. It's always used by these committees. This is the same, by the way, our climate change committee forecast that by 2020, electric cars in the UK would be much cheaper than internal combustion engine cars. Much cheaper. They forecast the average car would be only £13,000. I mean, these are extreme green nutters, to put it bluntly. And they use all these figures to justify anything. As you'll see, the claims they make in their report are ridiculous.
Pauline, so he says that this is definitely an example of global warming. These heat waves that we are supposedly going to be experiencing. Is that also your view with that as well?
No, it isn't. And if you look at this report, I mean, heat does kill.
Yeah,
heat can kill.
We know.
And let's look back to 1911. Yeah, in 1911, over 41,000 people died in Paris from heat. Half of them babies. They didn't have air conditioning, of course, so they didn't have the air conditioning which fossil fuels would be needed for. But so, and by the way, the temperature then, and this is it, the temperature in 1911. This is on Jim's graph. That year was recorded as the coldest on Jim's graph. And
well, here you can see the graph I was referring to there. What I've taken is, the alarmist graph of temperatures where they've adjusted the past. It was the graph that was following this that Jim bet me £100 was the raw measured data. But what I've just pointed out, it was the 1911 was actually the coldest on the graph. So it's the coldest for the last 120 odd years. And that's where they've made it. But in reality, we had that heat wave in Paris. We had the heat wave in Australia, the heat wave in America, throughout Europe and the Far East. So worldwide, we had a heat wave in 1911 that killed a lot of people. So, and it really was a heat wave. It went on week after week after week. In Paris, it was about 7 weeks of very high temperatures. Now, this graph shows the USA observed temperatures on the top part there, and the USA adjusted temperatures after they did all the deductions and so on, historically. And there you can see the 1911 actual recording was pretty high, and the eventual recording was much lower. And this is what they do, they've adjusted it. So they did lower their temperatures from the reading. By the way, the 1921 one was even worse. It was up there and then down to here. So these heat waves were measured at the time, but they've just been written out of history. Quite Orwellian, really. And what I was trying to do here was join a couple of dots. I was trying to show how history has been changed on heat waves, and it has been, because there have been heat waves in the past. And don't forget, this is 1920s, 1911. CO2 levels were almost the same as industrial levels, the Industrial Revolution 1850 levels then. So they couldn't have been caused by CO2. And but they get written out of history to meet the agenda.
It was the heat wave that killed 41,000 people.
What, in the same year?
In the same year. They adjusted it downwards, you see, historically. So I'm just joining some dots together there.
You had a bit.
Yeah, go on.
OK, so then what this committee is advising, we have a minister about this, a minister appointed just to do things like paint your roof white and have shutters. So my advice to the public, if they believe this nonsense, is don't go on holiday. Don't go on holiday to the Canary Islands, you're going to die. Don't actually have a few degrees difference in temperature, you're going to die. And we need a minister now, and billions of pounds, apparently, spent on this. It's ridiculous. And you know what they're doing? They've advised that we name a heat period like we name storms, because that makes it bigger and more effective. So 20 degrees is all you need for a heat wave. 20 degrees.
Yeah.
Of course, this is absurd. What they're saying is, if you've got a temperature at 20 degrees or more for a period of days, like 3 or 4 days, you name that as a heat event, and by naming it we can make it even more scary. But look here, in practice we should be heating our home based on age and health of your household. The World Health Organization suggests 20 degrees is the ideal temperature for the old, younger, unwell. For healthy adults, you should heat the home to the room temperature you feel comfortable in. Wow, but this now is going to be a heat event. It's absurd. Jim later on in this is going to be referring to instantaneous temperatures. These are the maximum temperatures recorded for a few moments in the day are recorded. They're the maximum. But sustained temperatures are nothing like that. So let's look at what temperature you use in a bath. Well, you typically use 37 to 38 degrees C. You don't really want to go above that because it's going above your body temperature. So, old people get into baths of 37 to 38 degrees C for half an hour or so. So, a short exposure like that to temperatures is common, as it were, and very beneficial. Never mind hot tubs. It is well known that cold kills far more people than warm. The Breakthrough Institute did a study. It has been estimated that about 5.1 million excess deaths per year are associated with non-optimal temperatures. Of those, 4.6 million with the colder optimum temperatures, and only 500,000 associated with the hotter optimum temperatures. So that doesn't exclude taking concern for the heart. Those 500,000 doesn't exclude that, but overwhelmingly cold kills far more than warm. Now this is interesting. The deaths associated with non-optimal temperatures have been decreasing over time, and it has gotten warmer, partly due to reduction in cold deaths. So it has been estimated that warming from 2000 to 2019 has resulted in a net decline in excess deaths, that's the overall deaths, globally, a larger decrease in cold deaths than an increase in hot deaths. And more interesting from the same study, even isolating deaths associated with heat, so we're only talking here about the heat deaths, in most locations deaths have been decreasing over time despite the warming. So in other words, even warm deaths have been decreasing over the world over time, and there are reasons for that. So the entire basis of this scaremongering by government is incorrect. So when things are actually improving over the world, this government has to pretend, these alarmists have to pretend things are getting worse so they can appoint ministers and actually try to control you even more, spending billions on a problem that doesn't even exist. And of course, taking this data from NOAA, you can see that the annual heatwave index is nothing like it was in the past. And of course, this is NOAA, one of Jim's favourite reference sources. But not for the data, only for the propaganda.
Look, we shouldn't move away from what this is aimed at, and I already said it's aimed at the infirm, it's aimed at the very elderly who can't look after themselves.
No, but we get that.
At 40 degrees.
No, we get that.
In that short hot spell we had in 2022, we did have the Met Office claiming, record temperatures, 40.2 at Heathrow Airport. And we also had the next 3 claims from the Met Office, all at airports, including a drone airport. However, a colleague recently pointed out to me that there was a record, a rail record, on a decent temperature gauge in a decent location outside the urban heat island, and it was a Pittsford school. I totally accept that. And why the Met Office didn't quote decent stations like this instead of quoting airports, I do not know. But how important is that maximum temperature? Well, let's go back to Heathrow and look at that. This is a graph my colleague drew up from the data from the Met Office for Heathrow Airport, showing the warmest monthly average months, not peaks, the warmest monthly average. And you can see here that 2022 was not particularly warm. There were warmer months previously. And just look at these 3 here. 1, 2, 3. Warmer than 2022 if you take the average warmest month. So you're looking for the average temperature for the month overall. So what matters is not just the peak, not just the instantaneous temperatures you were. I mean, again, you can have an old person, I'm old, I'm in my 79th year now, sitting in a bath at a hot temperature, 37 degrees, no problem for an hour or two. No problem in a hot tub either. But what you cannot do is have prolonged heat out in the atmosphere over a long, long time. That is the killer. The Paris heatwave was 7 weeks.
We get that. But we've now moved on because we don't want anyone to die of heat or cold, and obviously the right advice is given. And if there are more events of either of these things, they need the advice. That's
and now
fine.
you've touched on it, yes.
But we've now moved on to ask about whether there's a link to this with global warming, and Paul has said not really.
And I say absolutely. And it isn't a case that 1911 didn't see a heat wave and people died. Of course, events that are extreme do occur from time to time in history. That is absolutely the case. But what we're not looking at here, or what we are looking at, is a seamless move upwards. So we're going to see more of this. This is exactly why the report has come in. It's not been ferried, suddenly sprung out of the rabbit's hole. As I say, it's scientific advice that means, and by the way, painting roofs white or surfaces white does make a big difference. You ever touch, when it's boiling hot in the summertime, you touch a white surface against a black surface and you will see the difference.
Listen, I know, I get very hot in the summer.
Yeah, there we go.
But I love it.
And it's, well, you may love it. And there are...
Well, we know that. That's why black people are darker, to absorb the heat, and why white people need to wear lots of suntan cream, because they deflect the heat.
And there were people out there who are looking at this programme and saying, look, I'm OK with 40 degrees, it's not a problem. The point is there are many people who are not OK.
We know that, but we've moved on.
And they will suffer.
We've moved on from that, though, because we're asking why this is occurring, and you're saying it's global warming.
Well, I'm not just saying it. Everybody else, in terms of the scientific community, NASA, NOAA, the Met Office, WMO, the lot, they're all saying the same thing.
No, they're not. No, they're not. And what I've done over the months with Jim is present the data. And as soon as I present the NOAA data, the Met Office data...
No, you don't.
And so on.
No.
Jim, you're not even a qualified meteorologist, for God's sake.
I am.
No, you're not. You're not a chartered meteorologist. You are not... You are not...
So
listen, let me explain.
He's
just accused of not being a meteorologist.
Let me finish the answer.
We'll come back to you on that.
There's an association in this country called the Royal Meteorological Association. It is the only, by Royal Charter, association deemed to certify meteorologists. And when you're a meteorologist, you're known as a CMET. I've just looked at the qualifications, and when I was checking that Jim wasn't that, when I was checking that he was just an observer in the Royal Navy, observing temperature gauges and things, when I did that, I checked to Mr. Dale. And funnily enough, the Mr. Dale, on the qualified meteorologist, I would have qualified for it, right? Because, he was doing the same things as me. So I'm saying... He's not on the list.
Jim Dale,
OK, so from Paul, the extreme right-wing water resource ex-manager...
Well, so there we are. I'm now an extreme right-wing ex-water resource manager. Well, retired, of course. I was never managing waterworks or anything like that. I was never actually involved in what we call operations in that sense. I was involved in the planning and the design and all that sort of work. I was involved in this, assessing what 1 in 1,000-year flood on a dam would be. I was involved in assessing flood control measures and flood warning systems for rivers and so on. I was involved in all aspects of that hydrology and the climate associated with that. What I was not doing, and I think in his world, I'm managing pipes or something, nothing to do with that. I knew how to do that as part of my background training, but water resources was not about that. And of course, as regards the extreme right-wing bit, well, he has to throw that in. Once when I was campaigning for the 15-minute city, or against the 15-minute city, because all I do is stick to climate. Once when I was doing that, I was surrounded by Antifa, who all pointed at me, 30 or 40 of them, and called me Nazi, 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 and the police had to intervene. So that's that world. I don't live in that world, and I don't live in the world. I know what his politics are. I don't discuss politics with him, and I intentionally don't discuss politics to do with my climate work, and I don't belong to any party, and I do that now for a reason. It's simply to keep my message on climate detached from the politics. The only thing, I'll repeat, I say, is that all I say is don't vote for parties that support net zero because it's so damaging. That's my only message, politically. OK, well, he's now resorted to that sort of thing, which he does all the time. Do not forget, if you haven't seen the previous programmes here, Jim has been calling me out ever since November. He's been calling me out ever since I started doing this, saying you're only a water resources engineer. And the reason is Jim doesn't understand what professional people are. He doesn't understand the difference between them. He has no understanding. It's incredible, his lack of understanding with this. But we'll carry on. I mean, it gets a bit hairy from here on in.
OK, because that's what Paul is, not a climatologist by any stretch of the imagination. So...
what about you, though?
So my training was in the Royal Navy, qualified as a meteorological observer. That was 6 months and then 2 years probation, which you have to pass in order to be a meteorologist.
That is simply not true. After the session he's talked about to qualify him as an observer in the Royal Navy, he is not qualified as a meteorologist. Full stop. He is qualified as an observer. Full stop. But he tried to pass it off there that he's a meteorologist after that time. Not true.
Then spent 35 years at founded British Weather Service after a 2-year stint in a marine firm in London. Following that...
What about formal qualifications? Because
that is a formal qualification.
Paul also has experience like you, many years of it. Which
no, he's a water resource engineer.
Hang on, wait, let me finish. In my view, you can either have the qualifications or you've got lots and lots of experience, which you have over many years.
Which I have.
Let me finish. Which you are now citing as one of the reasons why you're a meteorologist. So he's no less of a climate scientist than you, a meteorologist.
No. So I'm also a published author, 2 books. I'm also an expert witness in court where I do murder, manslaughter, RTAs. You don't get to go in court as an expert witness unless you are a qualified expert.
I am totally puzzled by this aspect of Jim. If you're in court as an expert witness, you have to be accepted as an expert. He's quite right about that. But if you put yourself forward as an expert and no one challenges it, then you might get away with it. I mean, it's up to the other side and which side you're appearing on for the expert witness to call up your qualifications. And it just may be the lawyers haven't bothered to look. Maybe they've assumed he is a qualified meteorologist. I don't know. But I'm just puzzled by this whole thing, because I know this. If he was standing against me in a court and he was using his meteorology, I would challenge his expertise and I would win, because he's not a chartered meteorologist, which is the professional qualification in the UK for a meteorologist. Full stop. There's no way around that. If you just look at today's standards for entry into even gaining somewhere towards a CMET qualification by the Royal Society, the entry standards demand degrees. The entry requirement is a set of graduates who hold a Bachelor of Science in a science subject or exceptionally another topic, but he hasn't got that. What you get, so even at the end of that in the Navy, you get the successful completion of the assessment may reward Plymouth University module credits towards BSc or PG Cert qualifications and so on and so on and so on a route to become a chartered meteorological and also a register for Institute of Marine Engineers, blah, blah, blah. So, I shouldn't say engineers with Jim, I know, but basically it's a different level altogether to the observer. Put simply, if someone who was qualified to take your temperature and put bandages on 40 years ago without any further academic qualifications at all, or exams after that at all, was trusted to operate on you, would you trust them? That's the question.
Yes,
they see my qualification.
Nobody said you're not, but the point is no, hold on. You're an expert, but part of your qualification is the experience that you have with it.
Of course.
And you don't appear...
35 years
Do you
of
have the certificate?
Yes, I've got the certificate.
Paul, he says that he's got... Which certificate is it you're asking?
He's only got the Observer, which is a technical level to read thermometers and things.
No.
Let me finish. Please let me finish.
Well, I'm just asking.
He's only got
it's
that.
the basics
he's only got
of what we do, Paul.
Observation is what we do, Paul. That's it. He thinks that's it. It isn't it. There's a huge amount more to it. There's a whole world outside that, Jim.
Not a professional meteorologist. That's just a fact in this country. There's only one organisation allowed to give that,
what is
and it's the Royal Meteorological. And by the way,
paid for what you do.
I would like to answer the bit about me.
Let him finish, and then we'll come back, because you have also said that he's not a climate scientist.
Yes,
so
I'd like to answer that.
Yeah,
right.
Not.
Okay. I'm accepted by Clintel as a climate scientist because my work was hydroclimatology. I was looking into the real world for droughts, floods, and I found the sunspot cycle in that data, etc. etc. So I did a lot of work on that. In addition to that, I've been in charge of a whole country's meteorological measuring system and so on. So in addition to that, I've got a Master of Science in it and so on. So what Jim doesn't understand, because he has no scientific training at all, is that when you go to look up, and anyone can do this, and I've got the qualifications here if you want to see it, if you want to go and be a meteorologist in the Royal Society, I found a chap straight away, the first one I looked at, who's got the same experience as me, right? We have slightly different experience, but the same. I'm qualified in science, he's not.
Hang on. So he's not qualified at all. No. I think we can stop there, because you've also said that somebody has experience and they're qualified. He has experience and certificates. You are both qualified.
Okay, so we're here.
So stop saying that.
And Paul's out on a limb somewhere with the rest of it, with a little section of the universe, and I got the Met Office, NOAA, NASA, and everybody else behind me.
That is simply not true. What I've done in the main is provide him with data from the Met Office. The Met Office saying that the storms were bigger and more frequent in the 20 years, the 80s and 90s, before they were in the last 20 years. I presented him with NOAA data. I presented him with NASA data. He just ignores it. He doesn't even look at it. He just rubbishes it, because he can't take any sort of cross-examination on the data, and therefore we can't really debate evidence. That's the big problem in this. And the format I'm in now, it's impossible with Jim to debate evidence. I'm very happy to debate counter-evidence. I really would welcome it, actually, very much welcome it, but I'm not allowed to. And that is the frustration for me. I'm dealing with someone who does not know what he does not know, and that is dangerous. An orthopaedic surgeon is a doctor, just like a heart surgeon is. But an orthopaedic surgeon knows he does not know enough. He knows enough to know he does not know, that he can't do certain things with the heart, as it were. He can't do heart surgery that easily without a lot of more work, as it were. So knowing what you don't know, what your limitations is part of any profession. If you're a lawyer, you may not know company law that well. You're aware of it, you've studied it as part of your training, but you're not a specialist in it. And they know that. So knowing in professions what you do not know is a very important part of any profession. I'm afraid Jim fails on this count.
So I'm quite happy with that.
No, listen, you are both very qualified, but you cannot continue to tell Paul that he has not got qualifications. He's told you, and you've said as well.
Remember, hang on, it was the other way around, remember?
Right from the beginning of the multiple appearances I've had with Jim, he has frequently attacked me, saying I'm just a water resources engineer. Frequently, and I have not responded to do this takedown, as it were. I only responded because he didn't just insult me on the previous occasion, but he insulted millions of people. And he's so thick-skinned now, and I find this incredible, that he's now saying I took him down, forgetting all the times I've had to ignore him having a go at me on this. Incredibly thick-skinned.
What do you mean the other way around?
Paul called me out.
Well, yes,
remember that.
You have called me out continually.
As well. So the two of you, now we accept that we are both qualified. You're both qualified, but in different ways. No more of that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Now, of course, I'm quite happy that we don't mention these subjects again, because I never wanted to in the first place. I've been hammered week on week on week, him telling me I'm only a water resource engineer, not even understanding what water resources is, and how wide that is. No understanding of that. And I didn't want to do this. But last week, when he, insulted literally millions of people, and pretending the hypocrisy of it just got to me. So I did an exposure video, and I did it directly to his face in the green room, but it had no effect. He actually said anyone can get a CMET, anyone can get a chartered. You just get a piece of paper they give you. No, it isn't. And that's an insult to the professionalism of meteorologists. So there we are. I don't accept we're equal in any way at all on this. I still maintain all I've said in this video. But because if I've stopped him doing this to me, then I'm really happy, because all it leaves to discuss is the evidence. And I can stop him insulting me and having to discuss that and waste time, one of his tactics. So I'm really happy going forward on this basis with Anna. Very happy, right? But it does not mean to say I agree, because I'm sorry, but he's done very well in 40-odd years. But he is not a qualified, he's not a chartered meteorologist, and that's what a professional meteorologist is in the UK. And by the way, once you get that, that's just the beginning of your career. just as when I became chartered, it was really the beginning of my career. Thank you for watching.